Let's talk a little bit about Jojopyun's situation. For those who don't know, it was leaked by I Will Dominate that Jojopyun was fired by C9. The wording was very obvious in the tweet, but I don't know how, or in the video he made, I don't know how accurate it is. I don't know any inside information about it. For being late too many times to scrims, meetings, workouts, whatever, right? So I'm gonna pull up. I Will Dominate basically said that, yeah, he. Wait, did he delete it? Oh no, no, breaking news. Yeah, so Jojopyun was fired by C9 for being late or whatever, like all the time. Uh, I don't know if that's true or not. Honestly, I don't know what actually happened. As far as I know, C9 has not said anything. So let's check C9 lol. Nope. Have said nothing about the situation. I don't think JoJo said anything about the situation. Let me see. What the fuck just happened? I mean, that was a few days ago, so that was probably the finals. Yeah. Damn. No, no, now everyone's just commenting on it. That's crazy. Uh, that's annoying. Like this is also the really toxic thing. Like people are going in and just flaming him now on his like that's so wrong because you don't know. Nobody knows actually what happened yet. Like there's no information on it yet. Nothing official has been made. I Will Dominate. I do trust his sources. I don't think he put a video out like that without confirming a lot of stuff. So I don't think it's entirely inaccurate, but we don't know enough information yet. And for people to like immediately jump onto Twitter and start like bashing him on other tweets is like that's crazy. That's wild behavior. I really dislike when people do stuff like that. Um, he's still a human being. Like at the end of the day, like he's a pro player, but he's a human being, and people need to respect that he's probably, if he did get fired, he's probably not going through the best time right now emotionally. So it's not great to do stuff like that. Now, my thoughts on what actually happened. I don't know. Again, I don't know any details specifically, but Jojo as a player, I worked with him a lot for a couple of years from EG when he was, his debut season in 2022 or 2021, spring 2022. That initial season with him, and they won their first split. Second split, they had issues and basically didn't make it. They didn't win the split, but they made it to Worlds. So people oftentimes let's break it down by timeline, right? Jojopyun came into the league. He was a highly touted mid lane prospect. Everyone thought he was going to be the best mid laner in the league, but he was a rookie and he struggled. He had his own issues. We managed to resolve a lot of that stuff. He was able to figure out how to compete at tier 1 level and ended up winning a split, which is great. Went to MSI, competed against some of the best competition in the world and Chovy and Faker, all that stuff. Came back and was really depressed because he felt like, why am I practicing? Why am I grinding still to play against LCS mid laners when I was just playing against Faker? So he got a little burnt out, which is normal anyway from anyone going to MSI, especially as a rookie. There's a huge degree of burnout when you don't get that break. So to put it in perspective, like people go from playing an entire split, which is already hard for a lot of rookies because they've never done that, and then they go fly to Korea 2 days later, 3 days later, grind more solo queue than they ever played in their life because it's Korea and solo queue pops every 30 seconds. And then they play an entire tournament. They do not so well because it's MSI. You're not expected to win when you're from NA. And then they get flamed the entire time by fans who expected them to somehow be the NA saviors when this team actually was projected to not even make top 4. And then they come back and they go straight back into scrims. Like it's brutal. That workload when you're not used to being in tier 1, when you're actually a rookie, it's brutal. And so when he first got back, he was a little bit burnt out, obviously, but he was also disillusioned. He's like, why am I going to practice? I don't feel like scrimming. I don't feel like, or he's like, I don't feel like grinding solo queue. I don't feel like working in champs queue just to play against these random LCS players who aren't even that good. Like I played against Faker. So we had to break that mentality out on him for a little bit. It gave him a couple of weeks to get through that. He eventually did. He's like, you know what? Okay. I told him, look, it doesn't matter if they're bad. If they're bad, you have to shit on them here. you can't go even in lane against an LCS mid laner if you're going to talk trash on them, right? If you think they're bad, you need to go on stage and you need to absolutely dumpster them. That's what you have to do. And so he picks it up, and like by the end of the split in summer, he was playing back at his level, and they did really well. They ended up getting, I think, third, and then they went to Worlds. They did okay at Worlds, and then came back, and then off season had whatever. The next year, he solo carried EG to playoffs, and basically was he got an MVP that year, playing with a squad that nobody thought was going to be even top four. Like, people thought they wouldn't even make playoffs. Jojo like solo carried that team, and he was a vocal leader. He was the one of the hardest working players on that team. He deserved everything that year for what he did. He was playing on a team with like sometimes a losing jungler and a losing bot lane, and he would still go ahead on his lane and manage to transfer his lead and actually win. I think if you're going to talk about who he is as a player, I don't. It's really really disingenuous to suggest that he just sucked on C9 this year, and he didn't. Like, if you watch C9's games, JoJo was not the main problem, right? I think their bot lane underperformed more than he did. But so to get back to the point of C9 though, what happened on C9? Well, I don't know, again, the details of what happened on TN, but I know JoJo as a player historically had issues with being on time. And it wasn't like, oh, he'd show up 3 hours late. It was like he'd be 20 minutes late sometimes, or he would just show up a little late, or he would show up, but he wasn't fully ready. So they had to delay scrims. She's just not good at time management. But he's a 19-year-old kid. Like, very few 19-year-olds are good at time management. And I know there's a lot of talk about how he's a pro and he should act like it and all that. He's a 19-year-old. Like, he's not going to behave in a way that you want him to because of being pro. It's just who he is. And most 19-year-olds who are put in that position, they don't think about being pro as a career yet. Most rookies don't. Very few do. A few end up going pro and they realize what it means and they approach it as being a pro. I think a lot of these kids on every team, in every region, have a hard time that first year unless the organization is set to build them into that type of player. C9 historically is a very, very good team for rookies because they structure their initial time to develop them into being a pro. EG didn't really do that as much. They kind of just looked at the gameplay stuff. They kind of worked around who these players are, and made allowances for certain things because they needed to get performance out of them. But there was a lot less rigid structure to it than what C9 does. And I worked with C9 too. So C9 is very, very big on being on time, right? Like, in the past, uh, if you were late to a workout, you had to buy the whole team coffee, little things like that. Just little punishments or like incentivizations for players being responsible, being on time. They have a very strict schedule. They work out every morning. They do scrims. They do practice. They do VOD review. They have to do content. Like, there's a lot of requirements on that team. JoJo's not used to that. On EG, it was a very different environment. A lot more. How do you feel today? And we'll make a decision based on that. That was how a lot of things ran on EG, which is much more like most other esports orgs. I think C9's a little bit in the minority when it comes to how rigid they are with like structure and all that. But um, I think it's a mismatch of player to org, right? I don't think JoJo's performance on C9 as a mid laner was the problem. It was his personality and who he is probably didn't fit with the org. And so that's the bigger problem. So I don't really like the fact that people flame him for these alleged, like, I don't know, like alleged like personality or alleged deficits or like like things that he did poorly, when it's not something that he really did poorly before. It was just how he was, and now it's considered bad. I think is the problem. It's like you've changed the brackets, right? You've moved the goalposts on him, and now you're mad at him because he missed. And it's like he probably wasn't fully aware of what it would take to join a team like C9, and then basically now he's dealing with the repercussions of that. I don't know the meetings that happened between him and the coaching staff or the organization or management, but I can anticipate that like a lot of that probably revolved around just personality mismatch, um, and probably some mismatch with players too. Like probably the team didn't gel with him the same way that EG did like his first year. So I think it's a tough situation. I think he's gonna be fine. I DM'd him and was like, "Hey, just hope you're doing okay." But I don't think this is not an issue that people should be like bashing him over. Like people saying, "Oh, he fumbled all this stuff." Look, if a team offers you a max contract to get you to them, are you taking it or are you saying no? It doesn't make sense to not take it, especially right now. Nobody's getting max contracts, right? C9 really, really wanted him if they offered him a max contract. So if you're going to pay this player more money than any other player in the league, they'd be an idiot to say no, whether or not they thought, hey, do I actually fit with this organization? Because if you think about it from his perspective, you're paying him a max contract to get him to the team. He looks at the team, he's like, well, they're pretty good actually, too. It's a good team. He doesn't know much better. He's not thinking about the deeper level of, will I vibe with these people? Is it going to be the best move for me long term? He's just thinking like, hey, these guys are really good players. They're always top 3 in the league. I'm really good. I can probably win a championship with them and go to Worlds and do well. I might as well join them. They're also paying me more money than any other team in the league is offering any of their players. That sounds like a good deal, right? And then you get there and you're like, oh shoot, I didn't realize I had to wake up early and work out every morning. That sucks. And so you do it, but because you're a 19-year-old, you do it begrudgingly and you do it kind of like, I'm going to wake up late. He always slept all the time. So he would be like maybe groggy and tired, not ready to go. And then to a team like C9, where everyone is almost always, I guess, locked in to that system and they understand it, especially the veterans who've been there for a while. And then if it's not Blabber, who's been there for like 6 years, it's Vulcan, who's been on that team for 3 years and then left to EG and came back, but Vulcan adapts that well. And then you have two Koreans, right? Thanatos and Berserker are used to the grind. If you put a player like JoJo on a team like that and he doesn't grind, they're gonna look at him like shit, and that's going to create that's going to create massive personality conflicts, especially if they know he's getting paid more than them. You know, imagine Berserker and Thanatos looking at a player who they know is getting paid more than them, and it doesn't seem like he's putting in the same work ethic. He's showing up late, stuff like that. He's not doing the basics that Korean teams would value as a player. Like you're gonna create massive conflicts on the team between people. So I'm not surprised if there was probably some personality clashes. I'm not surprised that there were, leak or videos put out of like Berserker flipping out on the team, stuff like that. Like the coaches probably struggled to deal with that too. They probably did, they didn't have anyone working on interpersonal relationships and conflicts and resolution and stuff like that. They have minimal staff this year. I mean, it sounds on paper like it was supposed to go this way. But again, that comes a lot down to roster construction. If you had asked me, would I put Jojopyun on C9 last year before they did it, I would have said no. I don't think his personality is going to fit that roster. I don't think he's going to do well in that system unless he drastically changes who he is, which as a 19-year-old, I don't know if that's within his capability to drastically change who he is on a whim. And it certainly wasn't like, I doubt it was made a prerequisite for him joining. They didn't approach him the same way they approached MNS, right? Where it's like, hey, this is your last chance. If you don't do well here, if you don't do this, then you're going to get cut. I doubt that was the conversation. I doubt it was like, it was established as a precedent that he had to adapt or he would be cut. So, yeah, all in all, I think this is not any fault of any person or any of the organization or of JoJo even. And it sounds kind of apologist to say that because of course it's his fault if he's late, but I'm saying that it's not his fault that the mismatch led to the situation because I can understand his decision to go there, right? Anyone should understand his decision to go to C9 if they're going to pay that much money, and it's C9. Like you go to C9, you're going to win championships is the goal. Like that, you're not going to C9 to chill and like earn a vacation. You're going to C9 to win championships. And the problem is JoJo won championships without doing all that. He won championships without putting in that level of dedication or professional like approach to it. So I can understand why it was really hard for him to adapt to that. He's like, why do I need to do this? I was the best mid laner. I smashed you guys before like not doing any of this. Like, and I've talked enough with him that I know that that's his initial mentality. He's like, why do I need to do this? This part doesn't matter. Like me waking up early to go to a workout doesn't actually matter. That's not going to make me better at the game. Me going to scrims or me doing this, like doing drills, like that's not gonna make. He'd rather do it his way. He'd rather watch VODs of Chovy and like learn from that and practice his own mid lane picks. He was really, just one of those players. He's got his way and his mentality. And unfortunately, it just didn't click with that roster and that team. I do think that, any team who, if it's true, if he got fired and he's off of C9, any team would benefit from picking him up, but they have to understand who they're picking up, and the roster and the organization has to be willing to work with him, right? He's not lazy, he's not bad. If you look at every single person who worked on EG with him, nobody has anything negative to say about him. Nobody says he's lazy. Nobody says he's got bad work ethic. Nobody says, "Oh, he's a problem in the back room or anything like that." It's purely just that, well, you can't expect him to be a machine because that's not who he is. Like you can't expect something from him that he's not. So I don't know if it's a scouting issue, like maybe they didn't realize that about him, but I think it'd be pretty obvious from anyone who's talked to anyone who's worked with him that that's what it is. I'm sure they had insider information about him too from Rigby, because Rigby coached for them last year. He was a remote coach for them. So I guarantee everyone at C9 and management talked to Rigby about Jojopyun before they brought him in. But this has historically been one of my issues with C9's roster construction. They oftentimes would put the best possible players they could find into roles rather than thinking how do they vibe and gel together. That's always been the issue. Yeah, Andy, thanks for dropping by. I was just saying I don't know anyone who worked on EG with JoJo who has anything negative to say about him. I think this is purely an issue of mismatch between organization and player. Like Jojopyun probably didn't do anything different than he's always done, and it's just an issue of C9 really, really heavily emphasizes and values different traits and qualities than he has. Like I don't even think he played that bad. I think it's an issue of like you have 4 or 5 players on that roster who are probably probably 3 other players who are grinders, and Jojo's a grinder, but in a different way. And I don't think Vulcan. Phil just does his thing. Like Phil's Phil. He's the most chill person ever. Um, but I think Phil also did really well on C9 because Phil can adopt that mentality. He can be that person and be like super responsible, show up on time, always, never misses meetings, all that stuff. I think Jojo struggles with that a little bit, but he puts in the work. It's just that I can already tell, like, from knowing Jojo, he's probably the kind of person who said, like, why do I need to wake up early to do workouts? I don't feel like doing that. I'm playing well. Like, why should I do that? And then him running it down in scrims is like an ongoing meme. I don't like the fact that people are saying like, oh, he's not taking it seriously. It's more like he tries things and he limit tests in scrims, which a lot of people don't like at the pro level. A lot of teammates don't like it. A lot of pros don't like it. But if you know what you're gonna do with it, it's okay. It's just like I think this is purely an issue of just like they didn't know what they were getting. And now it sucks because if it's true he got fired, like it looks really bad for him, and I don't think it's not necessarily fair. On the upside, if this does actually turn out to be exactly what was described and he's kicked off C9 and he's looking for a team, I don't think there's any team that won't benefit from picking him up. But I hope it's a learning point for him too. Like, I said he's 19. Well, he's not going to be 19 forever. Hopefully he learns from the experience, and hopefully he figures out like how to take the next step in becoming like a long-term professional. That's been a struggle for him, I think. He did pretty well at EG like the year after because he had to, right? They basically said you have to be the leader on this team. We don't have Inspired, we don't have some or Impact, we don't have anyone else. He had to take over as the leader, and he did really well with it. But he's one of those people where I think he needs incentive and he needs to have a reason to become that person, and he'll do it. Yeah. That's basically my thoughts on. Again, I don't know any specific details about what happened on C9. I don't know specific details about, you know, what even happened because nobody does yet except for maybe Dom and whoever leaked it to Dom. But my read on it from the outside is having known both C9 intimately and knowing Jojo intimately, this was a mismatch from day one. And I said it way back. I was like, I mean, Jojopyun's a great mid laner. They need a mid laner. I don't think they should take like Jojopyun. I understand why they would want to take him. I just don't know how it's gonna go because it's just he's not used to playing with a team like that. Like C9 is a very unique team. It's like if you put Jojopyun in TL, I think the exact same thing happens. TL probably fires him earlier because those four players are not, they're not going to tolerate that, you know? Like, even though Impact worked with him, like, it's just EG was a very different environment than TL or C9. Like, I think that's the problem is like you're putting people into situations where they're not going to thrive. They're being put in situations they're not going to thrive in, and then you're blaming them because they didn't do well. So yeah, I don't, again, I don't want to go too much into like blaming anyone. I don't think it's either party's fault, but I think there's a lot of hate being thrown out that probably isn't deserved. Um, and I definitely think it should, in some ways, revamp how team rosters are constructed. Hopefully.